Dear viewers, participants of this webinar, my name is Robert Wiggers, or Robert Wiggers in Dutch, and I'm the host of this webinar, your host today. Welcome on behalf of Wilde Ganzen to this webinar, Impactful Partnerships. Today our speakers Linda van der Hoek and Anna Vellinga, moderated by Dr. Sarah Kinsbergen of Radboud University, will speak about equal partnerships. If there are any questions, you can post these to our speakers in the chat box during the presentation. They will respond to your questions at the end of this webinar. Please keep your microphone on mute during the presentations. Afterwards, if you would like to post a question, you can use the option to raise your hand at the bottom of your Zoom. So please keep these suggestions in mind. And then I would like to invite the Anna and Linda and Dr. Kinsbergen to come to this table and do their job and do it well. And I'll be back to you later.
Hi, good afternoon to all of you. Great to have you here. Maybe some of you are still a little bit blinded by watching the solar eclipse. I'm very curious to learn if some of you have been watching it, at least for those who are based in the Netherlands. So good afternoon. Maybe some of you are still in the morning or in the afternoon or maybe early evening. For those who participated in the earlier webinars, this is a bit of a different setup. I'm here with Linda and with Anna. And I have the honor to talk to these two bright young researchers that conducted, as part of their master thesis, they've conducting research in cooperation with Wilde Ganzen and myself. And we're here today with you and the two of them to learn what they've learned during their research. So very happy to have both of them here. It was a pleasure for me working with them, supervising them, co-supervising them. And of course, I hope it was also a pleasure for them working with me. Maybe they can share a bit of secret insights with you on that as well. And for those who attended the previous webinars, I have to disappoint you straight from the start, because this time there won't be music from my side. But for those of you who really think of a great song that resonates with the discussion of this afternoon session, please write down your musical inspiration in the chat. So for all of you, you can continue this webinar afterwards by listening to some songs that remind you of a discussion on equal authentic partnerships. So let's move on to the research of Anna and Linda. So both of them delved into the very current topic of authentic partnerships. Partnerships between donor and recipient organizations, more precisely, between Northern-based. I think one of you is not muted. Maybe you can mute yourself. It always sounds a bit impolite, but that would be nice if you could do that. Always great to have some unexpected interaction with you. So more precisely, Anna and Linda delved into the question of cooperation partnerships between Northern-based donor organizations and Southern-based recipient organizations, their counterparts. And just a bit of a reflection on this topic of authentic partnerships. We find ourselves in a time where there's a renewed and sometimes a bit of a heated discussion on shifting power from organizations based in the global north to organizations, community members in the global south. We find ourselves, if you ask me, in a time where organizations and individuals working in the field of international development cooperation are heavily involved in renegotiating and redefining their roles. I'm just looking at our technical supporter if he manages to mute this specific person. So please, if it is you who is not muted, mute yourself. It's a little bit disturbing, although it feels like you're in a very inspiring, creative environment. Okay, thank you so much, Leonard, for helping us out here. So yeah, sometimes heated debate on shifting power, and also in the research cooperation between Radboud University and Wilde Ganzen, shifting power, cooperation partnerships is one of the topics we spend quite some attention in our research cooperation. And of course, also for Wilde Ganzen, it is an important topic. Most of you might probably know the Change the Game program of Wilde Ganzen. Maybe you're an organization that participated in the program, and good for you to know is that all organizations that participated in the study of Anna and Linda also participated in the Change the Game program. So as part of our conversation, we will also reflect on the role of that program. Okay, so I will talk to Anna and Linda on what they've learned in their research, on what they've been doing and why and how. And they will formulate some ideas on how to move forward. And after that, as Robert has been saying, there's plenty of time for you to ask your questions. You can share them in the chat between this discussion. And for those who are wondering, but who is that lady in black talking? My name is Sarah, and I'm working at Radboud University as a researcher and assistant professor in the field of development studies. And I've been studying for many years the role of small-scale, voluntary, northern-based development organizations. And partnerships between them and their local counterparts is one of the key topics in my research. And I'm your host in this webinar, as you might have noticed. But then the question, of course, is who are Anna and Linda? So Linda, could you please briefly introduce yourself to our audience?
Okay, of course I can. So my name is Linda van der Hoek. I'm a student at the University of Wageningen. I'm doing my Master International Development Studies there. And well, the study that I did was part as well for my master thesis. So that's about me a bit.
Thank you, Linda. And at my left-hand side, we have... I don't have to mix up names. I've been working for them for many months, but I'm really bad at names, as some people might know. Don't take it personal. No. Who are you?
Well, hello, my name is Anna Vellinga. I'm a master's student at Radboud University in Anthropology and Development Studies. And I've been writing my thesis as well in cooperation with Sarah. And I've been specifically focusing on Dutch partnerships with Ugandan partners. So that was my focus, and Linda's focus has been on India.
So we have, on this side, you studied partnerships between Dutch-based organizations and their counterparts in Uganda, and we have Linda, who studied the same type of partnerships, but then with a focus on India. So then the final question before we can start this actual conversation is, who are you? Yeah, of course, we can't enter in a one-on-one introduction of all of you, but we will start a poll. And then the question is, who are you? Are you working for a private development initiative, a small-scale voluntary development organization based in the global north? Or are you maybe a community-based organization based in the global south, but maybe you're someone completely else? And of course, we're talking to you in your professional or your voluntary role. I can imagine that most of you have multiple identities. So I'm looking at the chat. So we see that half of you are working for a Dutch private development initiative, and the other half is saying, I'm someone else. So no, we also have someone representing, a couple of you are representing community-based organizations based in the global south. Great to have all of you here. Thank you. Okay, let's start this conversation. Of course, I hope you're really as much looking forward as I am to learn more about the studies. So my first question is to Linda. So we're talking about equal partnerships, but what actually is it that we're talking about, and why is it so important that we talk about it?
Well, that's a good question to ask at the start, of course. When we talk about equal partnerships, we are talking about a different kind of institutional relationship. It really differs because it's based on the value of equality. And equal partnerships have several features. Some of them are having a shared vision, having a mutual accountability, that there is respect and trust in the partnership, that there is a shared responsibility, but also one of them is also to have a long-standing relationship. And that is one of the characteristics of the Dutch citizens initiatives.
Okay, so this sounds like, as you're saying, this is not just a general type of partnership, but a very specific type of partnership that quite, sounds quite demanding. Yeah, it doesn't fall out of the sky to have an equal partnership. Am I right?
Yes, yes. And it's also the aim of having an equal partnership. The why of having an equal partnership is because it is seen as one of the preconditions for local ownership and therefore also for sustainable development interventions. So it is really demanding.
So it's both for ideological reasons that we strive for equal partnerships in the field of international development, but also in terms of impact, sustainability, local ownership, that it is high on the agenda.
Yes, indeed.
Okay, thank you. So then I'm moving to Anna. So Anna, could you explain a little bit to our audience? So what is the role of equal partnerships in the studies that you have been conducting?
Yes, of course. In our studies, we interviewed Dutch partners and our local partners, and we asked them questions based on 3 topics, which were financial flows, decision-making, and accountability. So when it came to financial flows, we asked them, where do finances come from? Who makes decisions? Who takes initiatives? And the similar questions can be asked about decision-making and also about accountability. So that's really what we looked into in this research.
Okay, so it was the central topic for both of your studies. Okay, thanks for this brief introduction. And I can imagine that some of you would like to read more, learn more about the theoretical background of equal partnerships. We will share some interesting readings for you, not straight after this webinar, but in the following days, we will share some interesting readings for you. So before we continue, we would like to ask you to reflect on the question on a scale from 1 to 10. How do you feel your partnerships meet the characteristics of an equal partnership? And to fresh up your mind, we mentioned there a couple of these characteristics. And no, we will not go into detail into your grading. So for those who feel we still have a long way to go, feel free to share. We realize that this is quite a struggle and quite complicated to work on in these international settings. So looking at your scores, one of you is saying, like, I feel rather comfortable there. We score 9 out of 10. One person is saying, we still have quite some steps to take, but it might be that it is not something you strive for. Let me be clear on that. Thank you so much. I'm not that quick that I can share the average score with you. If there is someone who is very quick at doing maths, feel free to write the average in the chat for me. That would be great. Thank you so much. Okay, let's continue. So we briefly explained, or you briefly explained, so what is authentic partnership and why we strive for it. So my second question, to get to know the partnerships you've been looking at, could you explain, like, how do these partnerships start? And for all of you, good to know, of course, there's a lot of variation there, but we try to sketch a bit of a general story. So maybe Linda, you can explain that a bit.
Of course. What we see in general is that these partnerships have one common feature, and that is that they have a really quick start. Mostly a Dutch partner goes to, in my case, India, and they see the country and become impressed of the local circumstances or the poverty there, or they visit a project of an Indian partner, and they go home with really deep impressions, and they share it to their friends and family, and they're really passionate about what they saw. And they quickly mobilize their friends and family, and they start a foundation. So it's really a quick start. That's also a common feature of these partnerships that both Anna and I studied.
Okay, thank you, Linda. Curious to know if you recognize the start of your partnership, if it also was a very quick start. Also, these are things you can share with us in the chat. We will not be able to directly respond to that, but might come back to that after this conversation. So then, my question would be like, okay, so they've met, they started cooperating together, they have this foundation in the Netherlands, they have a local counterpart wherever, for example, in India or in Uganda. So how then do they cooperate? How do they make agreements? How do they set up a lot of projects, but how do they go about that process of joining forces and implementing all kind of great interventions?
Mm-hmm. Well, when we take it all back to the start, most of the times the Dutch partners meet their local partners and they weren't planning on starting their organization. It's just happened out of, well, impressions that they got when they visited the local partner. But because they didn't really have a set idea in mind, they start working together very quickly, but mostly in the beginning, not that structured. So they're still figuring out, what do we want to focus on? Do we, for example, want to focus on education, or do we want to focus on women? And we also see that they start thinking about budget. And what we really see in the beginning is that there is a policy framework that's being set up. So the Dutch partner starts thinking, which amount of money can I spend? Where do I want to spend it on? And all those kinds of things. And because the Dutch partner is still figuring those things out, it's difficult for the local partner to really get a grasp on that, because they start handing in projects and they get rejected and they don't know why. And we see that over the years, as partners keep working together, that this implicit framework becomes much more clear. Like, they know our Dutch partner wants to see these kind of projects for this amount of budget. And so they start handing in projects that fit that description, that framework. So when I asked the partners about this, they told me, like, our decision making is very mutual. Like, we cooperate, we send messages back and forth. But what we really see is that these messages, even though they are joint, they are within that framework that I just spoke about. So they are really within a preset framework that the decisions are being made.
Okay, thank you. So that framework plays a very critical role in that partnership, where you're saying that, yes, a lot of mutual decision making, but within a framework. And who is setting the boundaries of that framework? You discussed it a little bit. Could you explain it a bit more in detail?
Yes, of course. Usually it's the Dutch partner, because they start thinking about what kind of projects they want to support. So they start thinking about themes and about finances. And because they set that framework, in the end, they have a little bit of power there, because the local partner can only receive the support if they fit their proposals within this framework. So in the end, it does, our research does suggest that a lot of the power in that sense is still with the Dutch partner.
Okay, thank you for that. And also here, of course, I want to stress that this is the general picture you're sketching here, and that within that there are, of course, a lot of variation, but overall, this is what you've learned in this study. Thank you. And I wanted to see, like, you've also explained, Lina, at the beginning, that this idea of mutual accountability, that it is also very critical when you talk about equal partnerships. What did you learn about that aspect of the partnerships?
Okay, so when it comes to mutual accountability, what we saw is that mainly the Dutch partner informs the local partner during meetings about what they've done about their fundraising, and the local partner does in a formal way report to the Dutch partner. So they send quarterly reports, narrative financial reports, and their annual reports. So in general, we see, and that's also what we see in the development sector at large, that the recipient party reports to the donor party. And well, if we look back at the elements of an equal partnership, what we then would recommend is that also the Dutch partner would also report in a more formal manner to the local partner, so that they also are informed. So that would be a recommendation when you're wanting to work to shift towards a shift in how you work together and having an equal partnership.
So still more obvious that information or accountability goes from recipient organizations to the donor organizations, but that it could be relevant to also.
And one element that is also plays a role in this is that, well, the donors of the Dutch partner mainly are private donors. They're their friends and family, their social network that they also see when they go to a birthday or they see them in the supermarket the next day. They want to explain, they want to be responsible with the money that they also received from their social network. So it is really understandable how they also have a focus on having a good report from the local partner.
So there's quite maybe some pressure there for them, experienced pressure to report back to their own donors, and therefore they need their local partners to provide them with these financial reports. And okay, thank you. So let's move on to that other final and very critical element that you highlighted as one of the aspects you're looking at when it comes to equal partnerships, the financial structures and flows. What did you learn about that? How does it look like in the partnerships you've been studying?
As you said, finance is very important. It's still a big factor when it comes to power in a relationship. In the partnerships that we studied, we saw that a lot of the time money still comes from the Dutch partner, or at least when it comes to the joint project. So 70–80% of the financial situation happens when Dutch partners send money to their local partners. So it's really, and there is a difference between that in a sense that some local partners only have one Dutch partner, so they get all their funds from their Dutch partner, and there's a really strong connection. But for other local partners, they explain to me, like, we also have partners from Italy or from the US, like we have partners from all over the place or from our own local network. So we really see a difference between those kind of local organizations with, on the one hand, only having one donor, and on the other hand, having multiple donors.
Okay, thank you. So let's look at these changes in the partnerships that you've been studying, because of course that was like critical in your study. You wanted to learn, like, okay, they cooperate for a long period of time. What happens in light of authentic partnerships, equal partnerships? So Linda, could you start by explaining your most important lessons learned there?
Okay, of course. Well, you already mentioned that they have a long-lasting partnership. So in my case, for example, in India, I had an average amount of duration of the partnership for 15 years. So if you compare that with other partnerships that are common in the development sector, that really stands out. So, well, they do really work together for a long time. And what we see is that during the time that they collaborate together, their relationship is really stable. Of course, there are some ups and downs, but that is not uncommon for any kind of relationship, right? I also have sometimes a little bit issues with my husband, so no, but it's not uncommon, I think. But we see that in general, they're really stable relationships. But also what Anna was talking about, the framework that is in place, it means for that framework that there isn't also much room for big changes. It doesn't change that much. When we look at the items, what we looked into in our study, the accountability, the financial flows, and the decision-making processes, we don't see that many big changes because of this framework that is already set in place. So yeah, that's one of the things that we saw.
Okay, thank you. Anna, would you like to add to that?
Yes, of course. What we also sometimes saw, that there is a lot of personal involvement when it comes to the Dutch partner, because, well, they've been working together for a long time. They have a personal connection. Sometimes they even attend each other's birthdays or weddings. But we also at the same time see that some Dutch partners sometimes question the abilities of their local partners a bit. They are a bit hesitant to let go. They don't know if things are going to go well, if they take a step back, and if they have a little less involvement when it comes to decision making or finance. And that's in terms of equal partnerships, that can be really problematic, because if they keep questioning the abilities of the local partner, it provides little room for the local partner to act independently, which then stands in the way of actually reaching equality within the partnership as a whole.
Okay, thank you for sharing. So as I explained at the beginning, all of these local organizations that participated in both of your studies also participated in the Change the Game program. And Change the Game is, of course, one of the very important aspects that are programs that aims to change partnerships, contribute to shifting power between northern-based organizations and southern-based recipient organizations. So first of all, I'm much interested to learn, like, how is the program being received? And how did the program contribute to the partnerships? How did it influence the partnerships?
Yes, of course. Well, first of all, I've heard a lot of positive stories. Like, as we
And
mentioned,
we're not being paid for saying this, by the way,
No,
for those who
we're,
are questioning our independence.
Yes, of course. No, because as I mentioned before, finances are a big part of any relationship. And when you add power to that, well, that is a big part. So what the Change the Game program did was focus on local fundraising, which really provides opportunities for local partners to branch out, to gain new donors, and in that sense, gain a little bit more independence, making them less dependent on, for example, one Dutch partner. So it really opens up possibilities. And when we asked both the Dutch partners and the local partners about it, we in the beginning got a very nice answer. They told us we liked the idea, we participated, we learned a lot. It was really an eye-opener. So, and many partners also mentioned how it gave them a sense of relief, knowing that there was being taught about local fundraisings, that was an issue that was being brought forward through this program. So that was really something positive that we also saw in this setting.
Thank you. And then, so they're very much impressed about what the program brings them, an eye-opener in terms of opportunities, possibilities in their own communities.
Yes.
And then, Linda, could you elaborate a little bit on the role of the program in these partnerships?
Yes, of course. The same for me, what Anna said, my partners were also really enthusiastic about the program in the beginning. The PDIs, the Dutch partners, but also the local partners. But what they also mentioned is that it takes quite a lot of effort to be able to raise the local funds. There are a lot of hurdles to jump through, to say in that way. So one of the things that they mentioned, for example, in the context of India, is some regulation that is implanted by the government, which can be a huge opportunity, but also something that is a sort of a struggle for a smaller organization, because this law, the Companies Act was implemented in 2013 in India. It was the first country in the world that made a corporate social responsibility giving compulsory. And some companies, they had to give 2% of their annual income to, for example, NGOs, such as our local partners that we studied. So it could mean a really big opportunity for these local partners. But what we saw is that the local partners, there is a lot of difference, what you already said, right, between the local partners. But the local partners that had already a big network in India and were the partners that already had the most highest annual income, and also are really renowned in India, those were the partners that were able to profit from this law, because the companies could find them and they could benefit from the law. But these local organizations that were smaller, more in rural places, they said, well, it takes a lot of effort for us to be picked by one of the companies. And it's really hard, but they are persistent in trying.
Okay. Good to know. So in that sense, they embrace the lessons learned, and they, in your case, as you're saying, for India, they really try, but especially smaller organizations, for them it can be challenging, for example, to access the benefits that they could achieve via such the CSR Act in India. I can imagine that it must be a real challenge for them. Is there anything you would like to add, Anna?
Yes, of course. What we saw is that there is a difference between the kind of outcomes of the Change the Game program. For some parties, as Linda mentioned, they had a network and it was easier for them to transfer this program actually into financial flows. For most of the parties that we talked to, they really started thinking about how to get more financial flows. And they started by involving communities and for example, through labor, or they asked communities like, could you provide us with materials to build on our project? So we really saw how they, over the years, tried to involve the community. So even though that was not necessarily in terms of financial flows, we did see something there. And but there were also some parties that really said, like, we weren't able to benefit from this program. It didn't work out for us. We haven't been able to do anything with it. And when I asked them, like, but why? Why weren't you able to transfer this into community involvement or our financial flows? And they told me it is really hard in our surroundings to do this. People are not used to giving money to charities in the first place. And the communities in which we work are very, very poor. And we can't ask those communities to just hand us money when they have trouble even staying alive and getting the necessities for their own basic needs. So that was really something that that they mentioned as hurdles when it came to the real outcome of the Change the Game program.
Thank you. So the program still has a clear role to play, for example, in the context of Uganda, where you have been studying.
Yes.
And then good to know that Wilde Ganzen can continue the program, and maybe Robert can explain a bit more about that on the continuation of the program. And then I was wondering, Linda, how, because you've been explaining about how local organizations perceive the program and how they try to really implement the ideas and the lessons learned that they learned, and how it is working out for some of them and how it is challenging for others. How do the Dutch organizations perceive the program?
Well, what we saw and when we asked about Change the Game, for example, in the interviews that we had, is that the Dutch partners see the program as something that the local partner participated in. So they don't see that much a role that they had to play in the program. And when looking at this program, it would be of added value for these Dutch partners to ask, for example, to their local partner, how can we support you? Because it is really challenging to do these local fundraising. So how can we maybe support you in making sure that that local fundraising becomes better for you in this case? So yeah, they could take up a role in this, but also because they could see Change the Game maybe as a manner to also take a step back maybe in their partnership to see how the partner can become more self-reliant.
This really sounds like renegotiating, redefining their role, maybe less funding, but maybe more a facilitator of their local partner that went through such a program to see how can we support you in making it happen. Yeah. There's a song coming up. I have to see that. I don't know. I will not sing. No worries for that. But it's the song. Nobody said it was easy. You can look it up. I don't know what the title of the song is. I also don't know the artist, but it's playing in my mind currently. Thank you. Okay, I realize there's way more you can share with us. And for those who are interested, both of them are currently, as we speak, of course, not currently, but when we finish this webinar, they will go straight ahead back to their room and start finishing their thesis, and they will share it with you. So if you want to read more about the report, about their studies, you can find their thesis in the coming months online. But to end this conversation, I was wondering, what would you like to share as an advice to those participating today? What would you like to share with them?
Well, we spoke, and one of the things that we also found in our study is that there is this framework in place that Anna told about us. And one of the things that could help for this framework to be less implicit is just to talk more with your local partner, the Dutch partner and the local partner, that you take the time not to take the time to only speak about your project and how is it doing with the project, and especially now in these times of COVID-19, right? But also take the time to evaluate on how are you doing as partners? What are your dreams? What are your visions for the future? And looking back, what have you accomplished together? Be proud of as well of what you've done together, and see how you can work together, and how maybe your roles as partners can also change in the future. So evaluating the partner would be a first recommendation. Okay. Yeah.
Celebrating, but also critically reflecting on what you're doing together and how you want to move forward.
Yeah, and secondly, which is also linked to the first recommendation, I think that it would be, what we saw is that these partnerships, because they last a very long time, right? 15 years. We saw partners that work together already for 30, for various decades together. Well, then they have also built up quite a friendship with each other, right? So it can be difficult when you work together for that much time to have a balance between your friendship, but also your professional relationship, your working relationship. So it could be an advice to be at the same time not too professional, to be not too much controlling, not too much formalization of the relationship, but at the same time not too much friendship, because that also could prevent that you can be a little bit more critical to your partner.
Okay, thank you. What about you? What would you like to share as your final message?
Yes, well, I really agree with what Linda was saying, that it's very important to sometimes take a step back and reflect on the partnership itself. So not on a project, because I know in the day-to-day activities that it's very easy to communicate about projects and to only focus on that, but really focus on the partnership in the long term. Because I can speak for me and for Linda, we've spoken to several Dutch organizations who told us we're aging, maybe we want to take a step back someday. And what could be more beautiful than take a step back and knowing that everything will be all right, that everything will be taken care of. And I think that's something very important to talk about, and not just think about in your head, like maybe we need to take a step back in a few years, but actually make concrete steps in collaboration and joint decision making on that, to really think if the Dutch partner wants to step back, how can he take a step back, and what are the stages of stepping back? So that's really something to look forward to. And on that note, I also want to conclude our talk in that way by saying that we've had a lot of fun. We've learned a lot in our interviews with Dutch and local partners. We've heard about some very beautiful projects that are being done, and about relief that was being given during these tough COVID times, which I'm sure that have touched a lot of projects, but also the way people are living. So what you should take back from this webinar is certainly not that everything is negative and everything is wrong, but we are simply saying that there's always room for improvement, and for improvement it's important to sometimes take a step back and reflect. So that's really what we want to end with.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, and as well, I also want to thank my participant as well, again to this manner as well, because as Anna said, we had wonderful conversations with them, and they're really inspiring conversation as well. So thank you again as well for participating in both our researches.
Thank you. Okay, I would like to thank the two of you, wish you really good luck with finishing writing your thesis, and also on behalf of myself and Wilde Ganse, thanks to all of you that participated in this study or in previous studies. We highly value our cooperation and also the openness that, that we experience when working with you.
Maybe Sarah, because you've also supervised both of us in writing our thesis, and you've already studied these partnerships for several years now. Is there something that that you've learned, something that was new for you?
Yeah, I've learned many things, also practical things, that doing research in times of COVID is really complicated, but yes, that also this is possible. So that is one of the important things that I've learned. And again, I've learned that the dedication on both sides, both on the side of a private development initiative and its local counterparts, that it is very impressive to see how this long-standing mutual commitment to working together, to working towards common goals, and that I can imagine so much that striking a balance between the personal, the informal, and the more professional, the formal and the structured, that it is really complicated. So it's easy said as researchers that you should look for a balance, but at the same time we realize how complicated that can be. So easy said, but maybe difficult realized. So as a researcher, I will continue playing my part in that, yes. Let's see. I see some questions in the chat. So for those who are wondering, why are they looking in the sky? It's because all good questions fall from the sky. Maybe you can, is this the, yeah? Please, Ari is saying, please address also the 3 words in equal partnerships: nepotism, corruptions, and embezzlement. I'm not familiar with that final word, but that's probably my lack of the limits to my English. So Ari, maybe you can explain a little bit more in the chat. I can imagine, I'm not quite sure how maybe you have been experiencing quite some challenges in partnerships. I can imagine, because these aspects you're mentioning, nepotism, corruption, and that third word, I think
it's embezzlement.
Embezzlement. Okay, sorry for that. Oh yeah, verduistering. Yeah, we are very much aware of the fact that some of the partnerships went through really hard times, not in the cases that Anna and Linda have been studying, but in previous research we've came across that, and we've learned that that is also a challenge that can be very challenging for private development initiatives, for example, to continue to work from a trust-based approach, which can result in a very controlled partnership. I don't know, Ari, if this is also what you are referring to. Thank you for that. So in case others of you would like to ask a question, you can raise your hand and then we will unmute you, and then you can also ask your question when talking. If you feel uncomfortable doing that in English, feel free to do that in Dutch, and then I will do my best in translating that. Let's see, Lennart, were there questions above or no? So far, no questions of your side. Of course, I hope that it is because it has been clear to you. If there are people who don't have questions, but have maybe experiences that differ strongly on what we have been sharing here, please also feel free to do that. If you have critiques on what we have been sharing, also for that, we are very much open to hear that. And there I've been working on international cooperation for about 15 years, but still having difficulty also with Dutch partners. I can imagine, Yeti, maybe you want to elaborate a little bit on that. Of course, that is possible. And yes, of course, the focus of this study has been international partnerships between donor and recipient organizations, but it doesn't mean that what we have been sharing is very exclusive to this type of partnerships. When you cooperate and when money involved, the issue of trust and equality is always very complicated. Let's see if there are people who would like to add. Yeah, maybe Linda, would you like to take up the question of Eric, who's asking the number of partnerships you sampled and how we went about the sampling?
Okay, well, we worked also closely with Phil de Gansen because we wanted to study partnership that also entered Change the Game. So the partnership that we sampled also is based on the years that they participated in Change the Game. That was one of the criteria. For my case, I studied 8 partnerships. From the 8 partnerships, they participate in Change the Game between 2016 and 2018, so that we can also see what were the effects of local fundraising. Further on, these participants were selected more or less randomly from what we got. So,
Eric, is that an answer to your question, and are you satisfied with that question? You can let us know, otherwise you can write down in the chat if you like to know more about it. Peter is sharing with us that he likes the comments on paying attention to the relationship in partnerships. And it sounds very obvious, but this is also something that we've been coming across for many years in the research, and also something that is very understandable, since in most cases, both the Dutch-based organizations and the organizations in the Global South are rather small in terms of financial and human resources. So all time and energy and funding is being spent on the projects they're working on. So the time to reflect, to take a step back, to pause, for example, we've seen it before that is quite challenging. And we also understand that there's also pressure there to spend money, to report. So again, we realize easy said, but not that easy to live up to these ideas. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Peter. Anyone else with questions or experiences he or she wants to share? I'm looking at your face. It's always great to see everyone sitting behind the screen. Ibrahim is laughing a little bit. Hi, Ibrahim. Okay, thank you, Dan. Oh, here, okay, James is, yes, we have a recording and we will share it with you so you can look it back. And also after that, if you have questions, James, feel free to share them with us. We will come back to them as well. Otherwise, I will give the floor to, there's still a question of Guus. Hi, Guus, great to have you here. Yeah, that's a good one. Guus is asking actually about the impact of COVID-19 on the Change the Game trainees. Could the profit of their network and the program items offered on this issue? Maybe, Anna, what did you learn on the impact of COVID-19 on the work of the organizations you've been studying, and maybe also in terms of local fundraising?
Well, when I spoke to the organizations, they really told me about the kind of projects they were doing. All of them, in Uganda at least, they were really impacted by the way COVID-19 measures had been placed upon them. Like there were traveling restrictions and there was just a lot of poverty. People were starving. So it was really in them working on relief for those situations. But that because of the COVID regulations and the added poverty with that, it became really hard for organizations to actually identify local funds because local communities were maybe even poorer than they were before all of this happened. So that was really, I think that is also something to keep in mind when we think about the impacts of Change the Game in this past year, because it has been a hard year for everyone. And I can't imagine what some organizations or some people had to go through in this past year. So we should not be too strict on that because, well, the situation has been bad.
Okay, thank you, Anna. So yes, indeed, it has a clear impact. We expect, especially for organizations that have been gone through the program only more recently, that were just starting to work on what they've been learning, that for them, it will have a clear impact there. Yeah, thank you. Yvette, we're looking forward to your experience. Feel free to share them with us. And Naomi, you're bringing up a very important issue, cultural differences. This has not been like an explicit part of these studies, but of course we are aware, and maybe Lina, if you would like to add anything to that, feel free to do so, that it does play a role in these partnerships, for example, the way.
Yeah, a lot of partners also said this as well in the interviews that we had, that they have also learned over time to be able to understand each other's language, because, well, we Dutch people aren't really known to be direct some, right? To be very blunt.
I know.
And and you especially know, Sarah, as well. So yeah, some especially mentioned that they have also learned, and in the case of the Indian partners as well, that they have to listen really well to what the partner is saying to understand what he is saying between the lines. So it is also something that comes with the years, to understand each other well as partners.
Okay, so in that sense, they can really have benefits from the fact that they work that long together. So in that sense, they are aware of each other's sensitivities and differences.
Yeah, and sometimes there are inside jokes between partners, right? Because there are sometimes errors are made, and well, then if you can laugh about it, it's fine.
Humor, very critical. Okay, I'm also taking a look at the time. So I think it's good if we give the floor to Robert. Once again, thanks to all of you for listening to our conversation. I'm very much looking forward to hear what Robert, on behalf of Wilde Ganzen, wants to share with us. As said, we will share the theses of both Linda and Anna in the coming months, give them a bit of time to finish up their work. And thank you so much once again.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Anna and Linda, and also Sarah, for this clear presentation and interesting, I hope, for those who watch and participate. First of all, let me say that I've had the pleasure to read a bit more and to discuss a bit more about your research than what has just been presented, which makes perhaps that what I'm going to say is not always one-on-one acknowledgeable from what we've just heard and seen, but I hope it adds a bit to a bit more yet to what has been offered. First of all, I think it is encouraging that the Dutch private initiatives or Belgian private initiatives or European private initiatives, because they also exist, and their partner organizations who have followed a training, Change the Game Academy on local fundraising and or on mobilizing support, which is another word for lobbying and advocacy, are enthusiastic or positive about what they have received and followed. And that everybody, or almost everybody who has done the training or received coaching is enthusiastic. They call it an eye opener. That word has also been used by you. That many private development initiatives also say that it has helped them to start reflecting about how to help their partners to become independent from them or less dependent to start with. A success is also, I think, that partner organizations say they have learned more from Change the Game Academy than just how to raise funds, but also that they have learned how to involve their own community better, the communities they work with or in or which they stem from, to involve them better in their work. That in some cases more money has been, more resources have been raised is almost a secondary effect, I would say, and perhaps the other one, more community involvement, is the more important one. But on the other hand, the fact that in several cases, and perhaps many cases, partner organizations in the Global South have not been able to raise more resources is also a disappointment to me and to Wilde Gansen. Another disappointment perhaps is that in the course of time, power relations have not shifted as one might have wished for in the course of time between the private development initiatives and their partners. This being said, it is clear that there are many hurdles also in the Global South to raise funds and mobilize other resources, and that organizations, both the partners in the Global North and in the Global South, are working hard to try to overcome these, but that more can be done. That is also clear. What struck me from, I don't know whether it's been said right now, but what struck me also from what I've learned before is that partner organizations who already existed before they came into touch or into contact with a Dutch partner or European partner, and who had already started raising funds and mobilizing other forms of resources and to work with local communities intensively, have made a greater progress after having worked with Change the Game Academy than organizations who are dependent on one Dutch private initiative. That's something Wilde Gansen needs to reflect on further and act on. I see several challenges from your presentations for the Dutch partners and the Southern partners. Those are, at least, there are more, but I'd like to highlight a few. How can we stimulate that the relation between private and development initiatives and their partners has a better start? Because it's been clear from your research that the start of a relationship defines very much how the relationship will develop in the future. So the start is very important. Second one, how can you stimulate that the local partners, the Southern partners, I shouldn't use the word local, it's a bit colonial. I heard you also doing it, sorry for saying so, but it's so we are so accustomed to doing it, but it's not good, it's wrong. Communities in the Global South, or partners in the Global South, are no more or no less local than we are in the Global North. So the word local we should avoid anyhow. But I need to train myself on this. So how can you stimulate that partner organizations in the Global South gain more trust in their own power and what they can do, their own abilities, and based on that, claim more space and more responsibility, more liberty from their Dutch partners? Thirdly, how can one stimulate that the Dutch private initiatives or the European ones take more responsibility in helping their partner organization in the Global South to raise more domestic resources and to become more independent or less dependent on them. I'd like to highlight a bit more the first issue, the first challenge, the start of the relationship between a private development initiative and its partner. There I see 4 more specific challenges. How can starting partners learn better, or how can they better map the needs and priorities on both ends of the partnership? How can they better discuss them, and how can they take them better into account? I think this is something to reflect on, but that's not an easy question, because who is there when a relationship starts? Most relationships start between 2 people or 2 organizations, and nobody else is there present, and nobody else is there to coach them a bit. It's something you learn by yourself. But I think there are things one can do to help starting relationships. I'll be back on this. Second one, and it's related. How can private development initiatives give more space to their partners to come with project proposals, and especially to accept project proposals that the local partners propose based on their own priorities, instead of the priorities of the individual donors of the Dutch or Northern partner? You also highlighted this in your presentation. In other words, how can we all together make sure that what we fund is steered by or decided by what is needed in the Global South and not by what is wished for in the Global North? Thirdly, how can one stimulate that the moment a Dutch or Northern private development initiative starts to work on the transfer of responsibilities, the shifting of power also to its southern partner, and the moment it starts to enable its southern partner to become less dependent, is not dependent on the number of years they've been working together, or perhaps even on the age of the Dutch initiative, the person who took the initiative to establish a Dutch private initiative, because the person is becoming older like me and thinks, okay, I have to think now about the future, how I'm going to transfer. No, it has to start way earlier. And perhaps even, probably even when you start to work on this framework that you guys or girls have mentioned as being very important in a relationship. And that has to do also with, I think, another issue, trust. How can you stimulate that trust between organizations, trust within a relationship, grows as quickly as possible? There is, of course, a level of trust when you start, otherwise you wouldn't start. You don't start a relationship, you don't trust the other, but trust is crucial in a relationship. Trust is crucial if organizations work together. But trust can be built. So what instruments do organizations need, and what instruments can we as Wageningen and Change the Game Academy offer to help organizations build trust? Now, a limitation can be that Wageningen usually, or I should say until recently, only supports private development initiatives and their partners who are already quite well established, usually, not always, but usually, who fulfill a rather elaborate set of basic criteria that we pose before we start funding and start advising. But fortunately, in our new multi-annual policy, we have decided that we also see a role for ourselves to support starters, organizations who've just started to reflect, perhaps even only, on how to support an organization, a partner in the Global South. And not perhaps the organization of the Global South itself directly, but more the Dutch ones who are starting to find out how to do this work. How to relate to an organization in the Global South, how to decide on what they would like to fund, and how you define the relationship and how it could develop over time. I think your research Anna, and that you and Linda, your research, I think, clearly shows how important it is and how urgent it is that we develop instruments for exactly this group of starters. And an important question then is, how can we reach out to them? Because we may not they may not know us, or we may not know them. So there's a real challenge for us, especially after the Dutch Centers for Development Cooperation, what we call the COS, have stopped their work. Maybe how long ago? Maybe 10 years ago already, and even more so. So I think that left really a gap in the support system for private development initiatives and their partners. And I think it is a challenge for us, and it's also a task as Wilde Gansen to help fill this gap. And we can do this in several ways. And I think those are, for instance, knowledge documents, what does a good relationship entail, how to communicate between different cultures, et cetera, by organizing linking and learning events, which was also something we are planning to do and have been doing in the past also, and by instruments that Change the Game Academy that try to increase the capacity of both partners to raise funds and mobilize support, lobby and advocate. I'd like to stop here. There's many more things to say. For those of us, and I'm exactly on time, I see, for those of you who have more time to stay on and reflect and discuss more about the issue, please stay. We will have organized that you will go out in small groups. You move to small groups of 5 people each, selected randomly at random, and talk about equal partnerships, its challenges and opportunities. So please, each of you who will still be there will be going to one group, and enjoy.
Hi, good to have you all back here. Again, I wanted to sing a song, but I will not do it. Something from Back from Outer Space or something like that. Great to see you sitting there. Some of you outside. Ilva, I think you have a great garden there. Great to see you. Okay, I hope you had nice discussions there. I hope most of you found some group members in the breakout session, and otherwise maybe you had a philosophical discussion with yourself. We were wondering just if you would like to share the main insights or takeaways that you take home from your breakout discussion. You can write them down in the chat. And if there's one of you who would like to share it out loud, feel free to do so, but only for those people who are very well trained in doing that in a concise manner. That doesn't sound very friendly, but I hope what you mean. So if there's anyone who would like to share main insights from the breakout while speaking, raise your hand, and then we will give you the floor, but you can also feel free to write it down. Can be both in Dutch, in French, in English, in whatever language you feel most comfortable in. Looking forward to your ideas. Give you a bit of time for that. Is there anyone who would like to raise the hand and speak out loud? Or have I been so impolite in my invitation that no one dares? So Peter is saying it's good to think well about how to start partnerships from the beginning. Yeah, also a topic that really fascinates me as a researcher. Also for me, for example, it would be really great to find those very, very premature, so to say, partnerships, but it's of course very complicated. I've been thinking of going to the airport, waiting for airplanes coming back from Gambia, for example, to see if people come home with ideas to start it. Very embryonic, but of course that's a mission impossible. But yeah, so both for Wildegans, but also for research are very complicated. Sylvia is asking to make the papers available. We will do so. I think Robert will say something more about that. I don't see anyone very eagerly raising his or her hand.
We can't see the hands because the screen is blocked.
Lennart is checking it for us. There are no hands. Robert, maybe some final words from your side on behalf of Wildegans?
Thank you, Sarah. But first I see a question that I think needs answering. I don't know, from Naomi Spijkstra to everyone. Does Wildegans support projects in Angola presently? I'm not sure. I don't think there is a project ongoing, but I'd also like to add that it is possible to propose projects from Angola. In actual fact, it's possible to propose projects from each and every country that is on the DAC list, the Development Assistance Committee list of the OECD. So if Naomi, if I may call you by your first name, you consider proposing a project in Angola to Wildegans for support, please feel free, look at their website where you will find the criteria if you've done so already, and be in touch with the people who deal with the relationships with private initiatives here in this organization. This also applies to other countries.
Maybe, Robert, I see some questions coming in that are still interesting. Hughes is saying that there are a lot of bumps on the road to real equal partnerships. Interesting to learn. Hughes, maybe you can write it down in the chat. What is the major bump you came across in your discussion? And I see Toon, maybe that's a question for you. Yeah. Toon is asking if the Change the Game trainings are still going on.
Yeah, it's a good question, because with COVID-19, most face-to-face trainings have been postponed. And have been postponed twice perhaps, but in some countries trainings have started face-to-face. And also we have developed the possibility that trainings are delivered, they're already there online. They can be followed free of charge on www.changethegameacademy.org. But national partner organizations who have the trainers who deliver these trainings and do the coaching have designed courses where they help local people, or again local, where they help people at organizations to do the online training with guidance and in a very structured manner. So if you want to find out for the specific country you're working in or interested in, please contact us and we'll help you find the right contact person and be in touch with him or her. And we hope that soon, with more vaccinations, and although the global south it's going more slowly than here, face-to-face trainings will also be starting in each and every country again. So the program will continue, albeit in a somewhat different form right now where it is needed, but it will continue again as we had planned in the past as soon as possible.
Thank you,
Any other
Robert.
questions?
And I see Hetty is implicitly sharing a song with us. Maybe the theme song of today is Rita Franklin and Respect, R-E-S-P-E-C-T. So maybe we can all listen to that one after this webinar.
Yes.
Robert, I think you wanted to make some final reflections.
I'm glad that the key song is not Let It Be, because something has to change for the better. Although Let It Be has helped me once in Vietnam when I was traveling there and ran into a lot of problems with corruption, and they were really impossible to solve because somebody very high up in the hierarchy responsible for foreign aid was directly involved. And if we had exposed it, all the work would have been stopped and people would have been arrested for having helped me to find out. So there I had to sing the song or listen to the song and sing along, Let It Be. Sometimes you have to do that, but basically normally you have, if you want change, you have to do something. So some final announcements. Feedback on the webinar can be given through an evaluation form, which will be sent to you tomorrow. In this email that we will send you with the form, we will also include a recording of this meeting. 2, Anna and Linda have agreed and even offered freely to share their thesis with those organizations, of course, who participated in their research, who collaborated, but also to those people who have been present in this meeting and even those who've shown an interest in this webinar but have not been able to participate. They're open to discuss with you any questions you may have after reading their thesis or a summary of it, or any reflections you may have. So they're very open to that. And I think that's very worthwhile to see and to do. One thing they cannot promise is the date when they will share the findings, because they're still working on their thesis. And I know from personal experience that it's not wise to define a date, to set a deadline, because it may take longer than you had expected if you want to do it well. But it will come for sure. Then thirdly, on the 24th of June, another webinar will be given related to the theme of equal partnerships. Harambee Holland will share their experience, their insights about 20 years of experience in Kenya. What they have learned will be shared, and the webinar will have a special focus on local ownership. Then finally, more information on Wilde Ganzen can be found on our website, and more information on Change the Game Academy can be found on the Change the Game Academy site. So let me conclude by thanking the speakers, Sarah and Lennart, who's been facilitating technically, for making this webinar possible, and you for attending this webinar. Have a nice day.
Thank you, Robert. Thank you.